Before Legendary Pictures pitted these two mythic monsters against each other in 2021, a complicated international process brought us King Kong vs. Godzilla back in 1962. It debuted in North America the following year under the banner of, you guessed it, Universal Pictures. Well, I guess they were still releasing some films as Universal International at that time, but you can get up to date about that whole thing in the last State of the Studio address. When it comes to the history of this movie, stolen ideas, rights disputes, and Frankenstein's monster are all involved. Take a deep atomic breath as we climb the towering menace that is King Kong vs. Godzilla. During a United Nations news broadcast, reporter Eric Carter informs his audience about a strange phenomenon near the Bering Sea. The water is heating up at an alarming rate, and the UN has sent a nuclear submarine to investigate. Meanwhile, reports of an enormous, mysterious god on the island of Faroe are connected with newly discovered native berries that hold potential major health benefits. The Pacific Pharmaceutical Company, looking to increase the ratings of their TV network, aims to exploit the situation. Employees Sakurai and Ferue are sent to the island by their boss, Mr. Tako, in hopes of discovering and retrieving the monster. As they gear up for their mission, the UN sub encounters the source of the oceanic disturbance. A massive iceberg glows with green heat until it collapses to reveal Godzilla. The giant heads for Japan as officials consider using an atomic bomb to stop him. On Faroe Island, Sakurai and Ferue encounter the beast known as King Kong. After battling a giant octopus, he drinks barrels of the island's red berry juice and is knocked out as the natives perform a musical ceremony. Kong is claimed by Pacific Pharmaceutical and transported towards Tokyo against the government's wishes. On the way, he escapes, setting up an ultimate clash between the humongous opposing forces. King Kong vs. Godzilla was initially conceived as something totally different. It was the brainchild of Kong stop-motion animator Willis H. O'Brien. He was in charge of the groundbreaking special effects that brought the character to life and marveled audiences back in 1933. His idea was for Kong to face off against Frankenstein's monster with San Francisco as the backdrop. This was a different version of Mary Shelley's creation, who would match up physically to the size of Kong, and there are documents out there with O'Brien's concept art depicting how it might have gone down. In 1960, he put together a full pitch package and approached RKO Pictures with the idea. Since they own the rights to King Kong, nothing could advance without their approval. They were interested, but were no longer making movies. RKO also thought they had to acquire the Frankenstein rights from Universal. During this time, the project was renamed King Kong vs. the Ginkgo. O'Brien was then introduced to producer John Beck, who vowed to find a studio to make the film. He brought in writer George Worthing Yates to expand the story into a full screenplay, and the title was changed again, this time to King Kong vs. Prometheus, playing off of Mary Shelley's original title of her greatest work, Frankenstein or The Modern Prometheus. From here on out, Beck proceeded fully without any involvement from Willis O'Brien. After the movie was eventually made, O'Brien didn't even receive a credit. The project was completely hijacked, and there was little to nothing the animator could do about it. Willis tried to sue, but lacked the funds to get that process started, and he passed away on November 8, 1962. O'Brien wasn't the only one opposed to what became King Kong vs. Godzilla. Creator of King Kong and producer of his first two movies, Marion C. Cooper, also threatened to sue Beck in 1963. A convoluted legal exchange led to Cooper's claims being dismissed. The ownership of King Kong raged on for decades after, but John Beck and the movie he brought to the world were not affected. To get the film made, Beck had to approach studios overseas. Stateside, he was turned down because of the potential exorbitant budget that would go into the special effects work. He found his new partners in Japan at the famous Toho Company. Toho bought Beck's script and swapped out Frankenstein's monster with Godzilla. They thought having their famous monster matched up against the United States' King Kong would be a fine way to commemorate the studio's 30th anniversary. Shinichi Sekizawa made the necessary rewrites to George Worthing Yates' screenplay, and the ultimate monster mash was officially underway. Both characters would be portrayed in color and widescreen for the first time. At that point, they had also had a pair of films each, meaning King Kong vs. Godzilla would be the third for both franchises. Now, the actual deal that Beck made with Toho was a bit unconventional. Toho owned the rights to the film in all of Asia and other select territories. Beck owned the rights in North America and a different set of countries. With the arrangement signed in perpetuity, there is no going back. Toho's production reportedly cost about $420,000 American dollars. Originally, special effects guru and Godzilla co-creator Eiji Tsuburaya considered using Kong's classic stop-motion technique for the monster sequences, but the limited budget forced him to go with the suitmation style used previously. There are a few short stop-motion bits in the final film, but they're not exactly King Kong quality. Speaking of the big ape, you might notice he looks totally different here. That's not just because it's a guy in a suit. RKO actually mandated that Kong's face had to feature a different design from the original film. Why? I'm not exactly sure, but I think the movie suffered significantly because of that. Straight up, Kong looks terrible. He's not even recognizable as the same character. Part of that is understandable because of RKO's instructions, but it doesn't excuse this odd final look. Limitations of the time period, including budget, etc., are probably part of the problem, but I thought Godzilla looked decent enough here. Maybe a little Kermity, but he's definitely recognizable. Overall, the effects are a mixed bag. Maybe it's the Power Rangers DNA in me, but I love watching the suitmation technique combined with miniature work, and there's plenty of that in here. When those little tanks came out and started firing at Godzilla, I audibly cheered in delight. The part where Godzilla breaks out of that iceberg is admittedly a great moment. Another standout sequence was the giant octopus attack on Faroe Island. They used real octopuses inside a miniature set, and the result is actually quite good. Maybe some shoddy blue screen here and there, but I was more impressed by the stars of that scene. 4 octopuses were used, and they were inclined to move around by hot air and a heated up iron rod. Where the effects fall short are in the fights with Godzilla and Kong. The higher-ups at Toho supposedly requested their antics to be made as funny as possible. The actors inside the suits were given free rein to choreograph their fights, and some of the movements were even based on pro wrestling. I can see some of that coming through here. This was obviously made for a younger audience, but keeping that in mind, it probably didn't match up to the expectations some folks may have had when they saw that these two behemoths were going to cross paths. At the time, Kong was thought to be the bigger draw, which is why he got top billing when the film was released in Japan on August 11, 1962. It was a massive success there and broke records. The film was so popular that Toho wanted to continue on with a direct sequel, but it seems like their agreement with RKO got in the way. However, Toho still produced 1967's King Kong Escapes, the loophole being that the movie was loosely based on an animated series by Rankin Bass called The King Kong Show. Following the triumphant Japanese release, John Beck got to work on securing an American distributor. He found one in Universal Pictures and sold his individual rights for an estimated $200,000 on April 29, 1963. As part of the sale, Beck was responsible for creating an English-dubbed version of the film that appealed to American audiences. He hired a pair of writers named Paul Mason and Bruce Howard to rework the story. Mason and Howard also collaborated with editor Peter Zinner to reshape the existing film to fit their needs. In all, Beck spent about $12,000 on the English-language version, and seeing the movie, that tracks. The big idea to make this more palatable to Americans was to make the whole thing a news broadcast. Michael Keith portrayed United Nations reporter Eric Carter, who's just riveting to watch.
The world is stunned to discover that prehistoric creatures exist in the 20th century.
In fairness, it's not his fault. They just have him sit there and throw to different correspondents and live footage of a movie in progress? Yeah, this whole wraparound thing made no sense. After watching the Japanese version, I'd go as far to say the news segments made the events of the movie harder to follow. It was a bad idea. Did we really need to listen to this guy talk about what Godzilla might be?
Possibly a cross between the gigantic Tyrannosaurus rex and the Stegosaurus, which is sometimes known as the plated dinosaur.
This Tyrannosaurus rex is a carnivore.
And look at that set. Did they shoot this in a janitor's closet? It looks like a Nostalgia Critic sketch.
This is United Nations reporter Eric Smithy with the news. The price of eggs continues to go up. Here with an update is our correspondent from Nigeria.
Hello, United Nations. This is Nigeria. That is all.
Thank you. If you're just joining us, this is the news. I am with a resident expert to discuss the matter.
Well, frankly, as this credible peer-reviewed source says, we have nothing to worry about. For as you can see, even foxes in boxes can afford eggs, so logically, we should be able to as well.
Thank you. I forgot my name and admit it, you did too.
The dubbing of the Japanese actors is terrible, but that's to be expected. What I was surprised at was the dubbing of the English-speaking actors being even worse.
All stations, report damage.
What could we hit?
It must be an iceberg.
Iceberg?
They have these scenes with English-speaking actors already in the Japanese version.
All stations, report damage.
What did we hit?
We must have hit that iceberg.
Iceberg?
Why did they redub these performances? It's not like they replaced the entire Japanese audio track. When some of the main characters are talking to the, we'll just say mud-covered natives on Faroe Island, they keep that audio.
One hero, Tambaran, Ikai Muyu. One hero, Tambaran, Ikai Muyu.
Baffling decision. Maybe there was a legal reason for it, I don't know. But they also replaced the entire music track, so we didn't even get to hear the Godzilla theme. Instead, they recycled the Creature from the Black Lagoon theme. A lot. The monster's first encounter ends quickly, with Kong seemingly outmatched. Military forces continue to try and stop Godzilla, but the best they can do is deter his path with supercharged power lines. Kong has the opposite reaction and absorbs the electricity. He attacks Japan, and amidst the destruction, abducts Sakurai's sister, Fumiko. Sakurai, Mr. Tako, and the military come up with a plan of loading the red berry juice in the heads of rockets and firing them at the giant primate. Combined with a recording of the Pharaoh native ceremony, Kong falls asleep and Fumiko is saved. The ape is airlifted out of the city and brought to Godzilla's location on Mount Fuji. The hope is they kill each other in a final battle. The kaiju engage in round 2 with Godzilla in firm control. However, an approaching storm strikes Kong with lightning, giving him an immeasurable boost. In a climactic moment, they tumble through a Tommy Castle and off a cliff into the bay below. The impact causes an earthquake that destroys the surrounding village. Only King Kong emerges from the water and looks to be heading back to Faroe Island. There's no sign of Godzilla, but his demise is far from certain. The English-language version of King Kong vs. Godzilla was released in North America on June 26, 1963. It seems like critics were confused by the comedic tone, but it may have satisfied younger audiences at the time. It's a strange movie, no doubt. Just about every edition the American version made decreased the film's quality. The Japanese version at least has consistent pacing and an attempt to build the characters. The first fight between our two monsters comes off like a waste in both incarnations. In the English language case, everything dragged after that until we got to the final fight. I appreciate how they tried to recreate the famous King Kong on the Empire State Building sequence, but it more pointed out how surreal this all was than anything else. Toho officially pronounced Kong and his random electric powers as the winner of the fight.
Kong has a chance. Electricity makes him stronger. Now watch.
Electricity makes him stronger?
Uh-huh.
Toho's rationale pointed toward Kong's more well-known presence across the world and Godzilla's then status as a villain. It's definitely not a definitive victory, though. In the Japanese version, we hear Godzilla's roar before Kong's as the film ends. For a long time, it was very difficult to find the Japanese film with English subtitles. There have been some releases over the years, but they were rare. Luckily, the Internet Archive and YouTube have us covered for now, so we can all witness the characters commenting on Kong stuffing a tree in Godzilla's mouth in several different ways. The legacy of this movie has largely been a joke for decades. When one heard there was a King Kong vs. Godzilla movie out there, the discovery of what it actually was almost always disappointed. But Legendary Pictures and Warner Brothers changed all that with the big screen fight these two deserved, and it even paid homage to the 1960s film. I'm not going to pretend Godzilla vs. Kong was a masterpiece, but it certainly delivered on its promise and was a heck of a ride in theaters. The sequel from 2024, Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire, has its moments too. They're entertaining enough. Yet, neither come anywhere close to Godzilla -1. That's just on a whole other level and one of my favorite movies of the decade. Since this is Juniversal, when I look at the American version as a whole, it's really only for die-hard fans of Godzilla and/or Kong who want a completionist view of their filmography. You're probably fine with sticking to the funny short clips on YouTube, or just check out the 2021 film for something more satisfying. On a couple final notes, how do they not tie in that spinning globe at the top of the movie to the Universal International logo? Come on, it was right there. Just smack a dissolve on there or something. Also, I could have sworn I kept hearing this character's name was Vegeta the whole film.
Fujita. Fujita! Fujita! Fujita!
I have no idea how you're still married.
My Twilight Zone radar went off when I saw James Yagi too. Had to mention that. Next time on Juniversal, we head back to Universal Studios and check out their version of King Kong. I got a feeling it'll be a little more intimidating. Until then, check out the Walter Culture YouTube channel for more content, and we'll see you soon.
Gentlemen, that's all I can tell you for now. Good day.